Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Glad that you could join us for another segment. In this segment, we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Andrew Salzman, Chief Science Officer at Innovation1 Biotech. It's a company that's modifying Schedule I molecules and creating drug innovation in the field of ocular disease. He's going to discuss the company's water-soluble cannabinoid type 2 agonist prodrug for ocular inflammation. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Andrew Salzman. Thank you for taking the time this morning.
Good day.
Well, give us a brief look into your professional background and talk briefly about being Chief Science Officer at Innovation1 Biotech.
Oh, thank you. I trained at Yale College and then went to Harvard Medical School, followed by a residency in pediatrics at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. And then I went to Israel for research in immunology at the Weizmann Institute and came back to Harvard for 10 years and did fellowships in neonatology, pediatric intensive care, pediatric infectious disease, and immunology. I then was the founding director of the critical care program at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati, where I built one of the nation's preeminent intensive care divisions for children, both providing clinical care and research. I then went on to the biotechnology industry and founded a company, Inotech Pharmaceuticals, that developed one of the first PARP inhibitors for treatment of cancer. And we ultimately sold that to Genentech. I then developed a drug for glaucoma, and our company had an IPO on the NASDAQ, and that drug developed through phase 3. I then developed a drug for rare metabolic diseases, and that drug was effective in children and ultimately sold to a major pharmaceutical company. In the past several years, I built a research institute in Israel where we've conducted novel, groundbreaking work in the cannabinoid arena, particularly in the modification of Schedule I botanical substances. And recently, a year ago, I was fortunate to join Innovation1 as the Chief Scientific Officer, and it has been a thrill to be at the forefront of that field and to be able to bring drugs to people with unmet medical needs using these very interesting molecules that have heretofore not had the advantage of pharmaceutical development.
What would you say would be the biggest unmet need when it comes to children's eye health?
Well, there are a lot of congenital children's disorders that have inflammation and lead ultimately to a loss of vision or even to blindness. There are also acquired traumatic injuries that children have to their eyes and autoimmune disorders. So there's a whole range of inflammatory diseases that affect both children and adults with eye disease, maybe on the front of the eye, so-called keratitis, or in the middle of the eye, so the so-called uveitis. There are a lot of different regions of the eye which can become specifically inflamed, and all of them have the common feature that they lead to a loss of vision or decrement in vision.
Can all of these different types of ocular inflammation be treated with one compound or maybe two, or do each of them require a different compound for effective treatment?
Well, they're all similar in the sense that they have an inflammatory component that's responsive to various types of therapies. And in general, the therapy today that's utilized is a corticosteroid. So there are drops available that are very effective in treating inflammation and these maladies. The problem is that these corticosteroids carry with them toxicity, and they can cause cataracts. They can cause a lot of damage to the eye. So they're both effective, but they're also deleterious. So what we're doing here is to provide a novel therapy that is both anti-inflammatory and free of the side effects that are so characteristic of steroids.
Were those side effects due to the water-soluble aspect or the lack thereof of these compounds?
No, steroids just carry a host of problems with them. They are associated with a lot of complications when they're given systemically, and in this case, when they're given topically onto the eye. Although they penetrate well, they engender a host of unfortunate and unwanted complications. What's really necessary here is to develop a regional therapy, a local topical application, an eye drop with an inflammatory agent that does not carry this burden of complications. We've chosen the cannabinoid system because it's very potently anti-inflammatory, safe, and well tolerated. The problem has been that the cannabinoids by nature are very oily. So they don't dissolve in water, and they don't lend themselves to be given as eye drops. And so what we've been able to do is to convert them by making small modifications or temporary attachments, if you will. This is a so-called prodrug approach, whereby we transform them into a new molecule that has a water-solubilizing part to it. It can then be put in an eye drop, easily dropped onto the eye. They go into the eye, and then that part that we've added falls off, releasing the drug itself. So it's a way to safely put it into a water solution, have it as an eye drop, and deliver it to the right place.
Is the dosage affected by this addition to the eye drop so that it can be administered in a drop?
Yeah, yes, indeed. It's water soluble, and it is therefore easy to put into water, so much less drug is required.
And this lends itself easily to be used with children, right?
Oh, yes. Eye drops are given to kids all the time for various ophthalmologic problems. It's easy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, are there any drawbacks or any safety concerns when it comes to using these compounds?
No, because when you give it to the individual as a drop, the drug is really focused on the eye. Very little gets into the blood, only trace amounts. So there's almost no systemic exposure at all. So it's all focused on the tissue of interest, which is the front of the eye where the inflammation is most common.
Should there be a need to administer a different type of molecule once this molecule has been used? Is that something that won't cause any types of problem or safety concerns going back and forth? Or is it even necessary to revert once you use this compound?
We don't think that steroids will be necessary when our drugs are available. We think they will be sufficient to provide an anti-inflammatory activity without the concomitant requirement for steroids. So no, we don't think other drugs will be required. It could be in the future that other eye diseases may be treated by our drug plus a combination of another agent. For example, there are a number of eye diseases caused by viruses, where you get viral injury to the front of the eye, so-called viral keratitis. It can be very serious. It's serious because the virus injures the tissue itself, but more importantly, because the inflammation that is triggered by the virus causes a lot of damage. In that particular instance, it would be useful to treat both with our drug to reduce inflammation and at the same time to give an antiviral agent that specifically kills the virus. So that kind of combination therapy is very attractive, and that's one of the things that we're currently examining.
Is there anything that you'd like to add for our listeners, and then give us a website where we can all learn more?
Well, sure. A good place to begin is with Innovation1Biotech.com, where you can see a lot more information, a lot more of the details and the science, as well as learn about the company. So we invite your listeners to do that. In terms of other things to mention, I just want to say that there's been a lot of excitement about the cannabinoid field to date. I think everybody's heard something about it. But very few of these cannabinoids have actually risen to the point of becoming a bona fide pharmaceutical. In fact, there's only one, and that was CBD, which has been used for the treatment of seizures. But beyond CBD, there's a whole host of other cannabinoids with quite amazing properties, in particular anti-inflammation, as in this case. And up to now, that has not been realized because companies have not been able to overcome this problem with solubility. Our breakthrough, being able to make these water soluble, has really transformed the scene. And so all the richness of the cannabinoid opportunity can now be exploited for human good. So I think this is really a turning point in the evolution of the cannabinoid story for moving from sort of a recreational past, which many people are familiar with, to really moving into the arena of pharmaceutical drugs. And we hope to lead that.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on Health Professional Radio, and I'd like to speak with you again.
Happy to do that.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Andrew Salzman, Chief Science Officer at Innovation1 Biotech. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.